Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel Springboard Thought. Today I'm doing a recent reads. The first book I want to talk about will be on a discussion video going up on Bob the Booker's channel at some point, whenever he's got the time to edit it. And we're discussing Time After Time by Marc Nash. So I'm not sure how much I want to go into this because of that video going up, but I gave it 4 stars. It definitely exceeded my expectations. It's a literary sci-fi satirical novel in which a man who is existing in a oppressed by women society goes back in time a la Terminator in order to take out the woman who's going to give birth to the person who births the oppression of men, basically. Only he's not very equipped for the task, and he is pretty incompetent, and things spiral off from there, literally. It's got a picture of a butterfly on the cover because it has a butterfly effect in the actual story. So he'll kind of like taken up one path, and then he'll be met inevitably with failure, and then things spiral off from a certain point in which he chose that action. So it'll be, I think, mainly, well, it ends up being one timeline of which we get the full story, but things spiral off into, I think, 3 different paths, I guess that you could say. He's sent back to an estate in Britain where a DJ Rastafarian is remixing things. He is agoraphobic, I think, if I remember correctly. Anyway, he doesn't leave his area, and he's watching the CCTVs around, and he's kind of DJing all the things that are happening, and it parallels what is occurring with this man trying to negotiate this past, even as he does not have the tools to really interact with anybody, because when he meets men, they're like really masculine and tough, and he gets kind of like beat up and stuff. And he's similarly, if he tries like a more tactful, non-masculine approach, then he's similarly belittled, and things spiral like that. It's very like comedic and appropriately funny, I would say. Like, it, even as it centers a man who's trying to kill a woman for, you know, a crappy reason, it is very self-consciously making fun of men and our current situation and socioeconomic times, or past, I guess, since this would be, oh, I can't remember exactly when he goes back, like the 90s, I think, maybe the 80s, something like that. But as he attempts something, the DJ also will shift the record into a different track, paralleling what happens with him. So it's like a remix when it happens, and he gets to try again kind of deal. And then the ending was both inevitable and surprising, which is what you want from a title like that. I think the prose work just wasn't super my favorite because I don't like really jokey type stuff typically. And this is kind of littered with that. However, it still ended up being a 4-star read for me, despite me not liking that typically, because of the numerous surprises and fun that this book has. You can see Marc's style coming out. It's not quite at the level of the 3 Dreams in the Key of G, which I think is sort of his magnum opus currently. Definitely my favorite novel of his. And yeah, this was just a heck of a good time. I definitely recommend it. And you can look forward to a more comprehensive discussion when it goes up on Bob's channel. Similarly, I have a video already out for Babel, or the Necessity of Violence, an Arcane History of the Oxford Translators. This was also a 4-star read, exceeded my expectations, but It's sort of a low-key 4 stars because it was disappointing, basically. More so because it's commercial fiction, definitely designed to appeal to people, incredibly heavy-handed in its communication of themes through the mouths of the characters to a large degree. They're always articulating very clearly exactly what is going on thematically with the novel, which is just sort of a pet peeve of mine, but a requirement of an accessible reading thing. So yeah, it's about a boy named Robin who's Chinese, who's then rescued by a white British man who recruits him into becoming a translator, because in this fictional world, the magic that is going on, well, it is magic, not magic, that is happening is on silver bars. What happens is 2 different languages, match pairs, are created, and the dissonance between the translated words is the magical effect that is generated. And that's a very simplistic dumbing down of what is happening with the magic system, but it's very interesting. It's most compelling, definitely, when it is examining that central conceit and how it parallels the technological revolution and industrial revolution of Britain. Absolutely. It is really good at signaling out colonialism, how the colonized feel or can feel, and their reaction to it, and the polarizing effect it has on people, and the tools in which the colonized wield in which to perpetuate their oppression on absolutely everybody, and how the people who are complacent with it are more apt to do nothing or, put down a revolution than to affect social change in the current times. That is really good. However, the characters are just really solipsistic. They're wind-up toys characterization, very predictable plotting. Even the title gives away what this story is going to culminate into, and probably what the ending is. You can tell generally by merely the socioeconomic and, to some degree, the skin color of the characters, what will happen to them in the story if you're kind of plugged into what she's communicating, which you will be, because she's regurgitating it to you in a spoon-fed manner, basically. However, it's not really fair for me to criticize some of those aspects, because you can't criticize something that is designed to be having a mass appeal and designed for commercial fiction and accessibility and sort of this education, I guess, of the masses, to have literary qualities that I'd prefer it to have. So it still exceeded my expectations in terms of the world building, the magic, and the actual Oxford setting, and the schooling and stuff like that was just phenomenal. But then other aspects that led to be desired, basically. Next, I read Crushed by Sophie Burrows. This was fine. It was a 3-star read. It's a graphic novel about a woman who is really trying to find love. It has very minimal dialogue, probably 12 lines of dialogue. It's mostly just showing how she navigates her world. She doesn't look like the typical beautiful beauty standards of the times, and so it makes it very difficult for her to find somebody who matches with her, especially in a meaningful way. And eventually there's a crush that develops between 2 people, including her. It's kind of a really fast read, probably 20 minutes of your time, because there's no dialogue. I really like the art. It's a decent enough story. It was fine. Next, I read Rivers by David Gaffney. This I gave 2 stars. This is also a graphic novel. This was very strange. It's about people who, in a sci-fi kind of context, I guess, or alternate history, have an app in which it brings them together. They all have very disparate lives, but they end up being connected in maybe surprising ways. It takes a really long time to get going. It's really hard to care about any of the characters. They all seem very cardboard cutout-y. And it's just so odd and strange, and a combination of soft world building that doesn't explain the strangeness just makes it kind of semi-pointless. There's a couple poignant reactions or interactions between the two once they're kind of like brought together, but it wasn't worth the payoff, basically, or the payoff wasn't worth it. Next, I read Lessons by Ian McEwan. This I gave 3 stars, but I had high expectations. This is my first Ian McEwan novel, and so I had really high expectations. It's about a man, Roland, I believe is his name. It's a little bit forgettable, as you can tell. It's about a man who, in the course of his lifetime, has seen many different changes with Britain since pre-World War II and beyond to after Brexit, basically. He ends up having to raise his son after his wife leaves him and becomes kind of like a notable author. But it's also about his past informing his present and his future, because it is revealed very early on, and I think in the synopsis of the book, that his piano teacher had an inappropriate relationship with him before maturity, which completely altered him. And so he's really taking like a reflective but hard-nosed look at his entire life and like sort of how the confluences of his reactions to things, both healthy and unhealthy, especially in early life, shaped the circumstances of what he finds very valuable in his life currently. It's a little bit hard to pull off generally because it's not capital A about something, which is a meta point in the novel. And so it feels very meandering in some point. It obviously is trying to show that every life has some worth and some meaning, of course, and that's fine, but it's also really quite long and tends to go on. So for me, it was just fine. It met the expectations that it was trying to set, and for me, those expectations were quite high as a reader. And then I read Acting Class by Nick Drnaso, who also did Sabrina, which I think was long-listed as a Booker graphic novel. So I had high expectations for that because I really liked Sabrina. This, though, was pretty bad. I gave it 2 stars. It was very disappointing and a very large time sink, basically. It's pretty heavy on dialogue. The paneling is very boring, and the characters all look very similar in an eerie, uncanny valley, weird kind of way, basically. Like, it's not engaging. It's a little bit disturbing, which is effective in the beginning, but by the time you reach like 500 or 600 pages of this book, you're kind of like, all right. It's kind of hard to differentiate the people sometimes. It's about disparate people coming together for an acting class, and weird stuff, uncanny things start happening. A person loses their memory, other people don't show up. The acting classes take on a disturbing, strange bent, and I think it's about exploring like the degree of which people, if somebody assumes authority over them, will cede different aspects of themselves to said authority, which is kind of an interesting theme, but culminates into very little. I didn't care about any of the characters, so it lacked the gut punch that it was going for, and it was very, kind of, like I said, a little bit of a waste of time for me specifically, because Sabrina was very good at cultivating an emotional impact that I was expecting this one to have. But there are so many characters, so many of whom it is hard to identify with in any meaningful way because they're acting so strangely. And you rarely learn anything about them that is not strictly pertinent to the plot, which is convoluted until it comes to a fruition that is very quick and I guess would be fun if you're looking for a surprise, but says very little about the characters in general, I think. 2 stars, unfortunate, is what it is. This is a section of my reading, not necessarily a week, probably more like a couple days. As usual, feel free to comment and interact with me however you like, and I will see you next video.